It's not enough to be honest. You've got to be seen to be honest.
I mean, it's a life-changing moment, but it also sets you up to allow people to fuck up in the future.
Managers are happy, customer service is better, they're earning more money, the wives are happier, the kids are better, and suddenly I'm a hero.
Ladies of the night above, proper Peaky Blinder country. Did you have any belief at that point that you would be successful?
And she said, I know where that is, the money is. Do you? She said, yes. She said, he's been giving it to his family, his first family.
Welcome back to another episode of Success is a System. I'm really excited today. We're here with the legendary Jim McCarthy. Welcome, Jim. It's great to see you again. And just before we started filming, Jim and I worked out we'd known each other about 37 years. Makes me feel really old. But the common thing that we recognised when I very first met Jim, and I went up to interview him in Birmingham at the head offices of what was Dillon's Super Sigs One Stop, it became, was that we both started as Paperboys. Both then moved to working into newsagent type businesses. The difference is Jim has gone on to meteoric levels of working as CEO of One Stop, the operating board of Sainsbury's and the Chief Executive Officer at Poundland, and so many more boards that we'll find out more as we go about. And Jim has always been, it's not just me saying it because Jim's here, seen as a real leader and inspiration in retail. So you're in for a treat. It's great to have you here, genuinely. And I remember when I first come up to your offices in Brown Hills, wasn't it? That's right. And I'd just been made chairman of the Association of Convenience Stores. Very excited about that because it was an important association for us both. And we were chatting, and I think I'd allowed about half hour, and you and I just ended up chatting for a couple of hours. It just went on for ages because I was so inspired by where you were taking that business, because that business had evolved from being like cheap fags or cigarettes into so much more. And you tell us a bit about Jim before you went into retail. What's your background? What got you into doing your job that you did, and your journey up to that point, if you like? Because part of what people get from Success is a System is where do people come from? Are they all silver spoon? Are they all got like an amazing education and inspirational mum and dad? And certainly for me, that wasn't the case. So tell us a little bit about Jim before we met on that day.
Okay, Mike. Thanks very much for the intro and the build-up, and I hope I can do it justice. Background: one of three sons, three boys. Father was ex-military man, regimental sergeant major during the war. A little bit of competition between the three boys.
And where do you sit in that?
I was the middle.
The middle, okay.
So I used to get the hand-me-down clothes from my elder brother, and by the time I'd worn them, they had to be new for my younger brother. So I was the one, if you like, that would claim to have been the hard-done-to lad. But when I was 12, Dad always used to give us pocket money for doing jobs.
Yeah.
So there was a risk-reward bit, and things that stick in my mind was when Dad had a pub, we had coal fires, right. And he bought large chunks of coal because they were cheaper than the small. So you had to break them up with hammers. And so the three boys, we would have fun breaking these big chunks of coal up with hammers. And then we'd put them in the buckets, and they were so heavy, you had to use centrifugal force to get them from the coal shed, which was a big old pigsty type thing, to the back door,
so
and to the fires.
Swinging yourself along, sort of thing.
We were going around like that, you see. So that we were sort of taught early on that if you were going to earn money, you earned it. You didn't get it for nothing. And you valued it because he didn't give us a lot, because he hadn't got a lot, But we used to like to please him. So I think one of my early recollections is to please my dad, I had to do well. And so I tried to do better than my two brothers. Yeah, a little bit easier to do well on my little brother because he was 3 years younger than me.
Yeah.
But not so much for my elder brother. But anyway, so that was the start. Then my mother was poorly, very working class family. Dad had been on the Triumph assembly line.
Right.
He installed steel staircases at power stations and things like that. So no background of what I would call...
No silver spoon.
No. I wouldn't even know what that was. You know. But anyway, when I was 12, we moved because Mum was poorly. She had cancer. She's a miracle, still alive. She's 96.
Oh, right.
But she had in her early 40s cancer, and happily, she was cured of that after 2 big operations and a load of radium. So we had to move from the pub, which was a hard life. People think it's a wonderful life.
Oh, it's early till late.
It's hard work, really hard work. So we moved, and Dad was, by this time, when drink driving came in, he'd lost some of the trade at the pub, because it was a country pub, and he'd taken up a position as a salesman with Scottish Newcastle Breweries. So when the pub went, he'd still got his job. Excuse me. So we went to live in Water Orton, and I decided to go to the local paper shop, which had just been taken over by a company called Dillon's, and do a paper round. And I'd worked out that, I was 12 years old, I'd worked out that if I took my little brother with me on the paper round, I could send, he was a quick runner.
Okay.
He was faster than me. So I could do it twice as quick if I took him with me, but gave him like 20% of the
So
money.
he was cheap labour for you.
But he was quite bright, because after not very long, he decided he could do a paper round. And although that broke the law, because you weren't allowed to do a paper round, below the age of 13, I think.
You know, I was your younger brother because at 7 I used to help my older brother do the paper.
Absolutely. And what a great training ground that is, because it's hard work. You're going out in all weathers. You've got to get up really early. You've got to get back to have your breakfast, put your clothes on, get you to school, because I used to travel to 30-odd miles to school on the train and stuff, and didn't get home until sort of 6 o'clock at night following school. So that was where I started to learn about reward, if you like, or earning, and delegation. But I hadn't worked out at that point that my brother was bright enough to realise that actually, you do it on your own, Jim. I'm going to have my own. So that was that. So at 17, took my O levels at 16, got those. So I started to do A levels and made a big mistake. I asked to do there were 3 subjects, I think, plus general studies, but 2 of those had split tutorials.
Right.
And they gave me special dispensation to do that. Unfortunately, it didn't really work for me. I needed the tutorial, and I was always catching up.
Yeah.
And so eventually I had to make this decision, either really go for it or leave and get a job. And some of my pals had left at 16 and they were very happy. They were earning money.
Yeah.
I could see this, and that was fantastic. So I decided to leave. And the plan, Mike, was to join the training program of Marks and Spencer or British Home Stores, as it was in those days, and Littlewoods. Those were the 3. And so I applied, and Marks's, which was the one I really wanted to go to, said, well, you come and be interviewed by us, but not until you're 18, because that's when our trainee
program started.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I thought, what do I do? Now, I'd started as a paper kid, but I'd been promoted to mark the papers up in the morning, so I'd get down to the shop at 6 o'clock, mark all the rounds up, put all the rounds up, put the magazine. You've done this, haven't you? Put the
give
magazine
them in the right order for the streets.
Absolutely. If somebody didn't come in, I had to go and do that round as well before I went home and all that sort of stuff. But then I'd been promoted to work on Saturdays, and I used to get 10 bob,
Exactly the same as
50p.
me,
And then I got Sunday as well, and a Sunday round. And if you look very carefully, I've got Sunday boy shoulder, because they were really
got heavier.
Yeah. So one shoulder is slightly lower than the other, you see. But anyway, that's the background. So I asked the area manager, a chap called his name was Ken Kitchener, and he was a huge man. Very, very happy chap. He was a lovely bloke. But he must have been 22, 23 stone.
Oh, right.
And we used to know him. There was a nice lolly at the time called Big K. So he was always known as Big K. And I said to him the one day, Mr. Kitchener, I've been brought up to be fairly respectful. Mr. Kitchener, is there any chance of a job, on your trainee programme? Now, I wasn't going to tell him the full story, because I was going to leave at 18 and go to Marx's. But he said, oh, Jim, yes. Funnily enough, we've started a trainee programme. Anyway, I'd been working on this programme for 6 weeks before I was interviewed.
Oh.
And then I was interviewed by a chap called Alex Stewart, who was the former chief superintendent of the Birmingham Fraud Squad. And he interviewed me, and he was so perceptive because he knew my father would be worried about me. So after the interview, he rang my father and said, he was Scottish, Alex was. He said, Mr. McCarthy, I won't attempt the Scottish accent, but he said, Mr. McCarthy, you'll be worried about your son, James. He said, well, I've interviewed him this morning, and he's done very well. He's interviewed well. And I'm going to keep an eye on him. So don't you worry too much. And that really settled my dad down, which made it a little bit easier for me.
But isn't it interesting, just on that point, how whole communities looked out for each other? You know, to think today that someone's job or someone in someone's job would ring a parent, the kid would be furious, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
and the parent would think, what are you ringing about? You know, it's
Yeah.
like, but how wonderful.
Yeah, and he was one of those guys in my life, Mr. Stewart, Alex Stewart, I always call him Mr. Stewart, that had a profound impact. He was blade straight. He was very conscientious. Being an ex-fraud squad officer, he was very patient. And that's not like me, I'm not patient, but he was. And he would pore over things for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then he'd give them to me and say, right, go and do this. And it worked.
Yeah.
So I learned a huge amount from him. And he said things like, never be alone in a storeroom if there's cash there. In case
something goes wrong,
something goes wrong,
missing, you get the blame.
Yeah, exactly. He said, and he used to say, it's not enough to be honest. You've got to be seen to be honest. And so there were little gems like that I used to pick up from him, and I would apply. And to be honest, I was pretty much in awe of him, you know, huge respect. And sadly, he smoked a lot of Henry Winterman cigars, and he had a heart attack and passed away too young. I think he was probably about 59, something like that. Anyway, so I then met Rosie. So
Your wife?
Yes. Well, I was only 18 by this time, of course. And I'd been running shops and things, and I'd worked out when you went into a shop, the reason that I used to be sent to problem shops, bad stock losses and low turnover and, you know, bad shops. And the thread was always, it was because they weren't being run properly. People weren't sticking to the rules. They were opening late.
Yeah.
They weren't doing cash checks. They weren't doing a proper stock and order checks, you know, and this sort of stuff, and keeping the assortment fresh, keeping the shops clean, and motivating the staff, and, you know, engaging with the customers, and trying to get to know the customers' names and things, you know. So when we did that, turnover used to go through the roof. Yeah. And so I looked like a hero in all those. So anyway, I was sent to a shop called Alcester Shop 33. Out towards Stratford-on-Avon, and that's where I met Rosie, my wife. And she was one of the shop assistants there, and her manageress was a Mrs. Heel, who was an amazing woman. Mrs. Heel used to be, she had about 5 or 6 kiddies, I think, and she would work, I mean, I wouldn't recommend this, but she'd work until the day before the birth.
All right.
And then the day after, she'd be back in the shop. Unbelievable woman. But she really helped, I think, develop Rosie. And Rosie showed me a lot about merchandising and things, so I learned quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I was lucky because she was a very pretty girl. And eventually she said yes, she would go out with me. So
eventually, that's where your persistence comes in, is it?
Well, yeah. I mean, she did turn me down about 6 times. And I was getting to the point where I thought, well, no chance here. And I was hitting above my weight, you know. Big guy as I am. Anyway, we're married. Rosie was 18 years and 5 days, and I was 18 years and 9 months.
Right.
And we got nothing. So, apart from ourselves, so we had everything.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And we were in love. So, the only place I could get to live, and I'm not sure whether you'll know this place, but it was in Small Heath, Birmingham.
I've heard of it.
Which is up the road from the Birmingham City Football Ground. And at that point, this is 1974, it was incredibly deprived area.
Is that Peaky Blinders country?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And just round the corner, about 150 yards from where I was living with Rosie, there was a nightclub type thing. And there'd been 2 bouncers shot dead on the tour, and, you know, separate incidents. And and our rooms in there, we had padlocks on every room. Yeah. The bathroom had no sink or toilet, so it was a shared toilet upstairs. So you had to go out upstairs to go to the toilet. our bedroom had a padlock on it, because if you didn't, anything you had would be
nicked.
stolen. Yeah. And my dad gave me, I always remember this, Mike, but my dad gave me an Indesit refrigerator for nothing, which is unlike him. But he did give me this refrigerator. The only place we could put it, because it was about 6 foot tall, in those days, remember the very tall ones, was in the bedroom. And so I always used to joke that if we wanted a particularly romantic night, we'd leave the door open just a little bit on the refrigerator, and the light would just gently
like a
waft
candle
across the room. Yeah. So quite rough. And I think Rosie was remarkable, because to put up with that sort of, she wasn't used to that, and neither was I really. But 18 months of that, and we had two, if I said ladies of the night on the top floor, interesting combination, mother and daughter, and we used to get cues in the hall and stuff, you know. And on the first floor, we had a chap, he's probably still around actually, he was a huge man, a chap called Bob Chesterman, and he must have been, in those days, he would have been perhaps 45-ish, and he was about 6'8", and probably 22 stone of Canadian ice hockey player. And if the customers for the top floor were lucky, they'd made a mistake and they rang my bell at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, I'd get up and say, "No, you want that bell there?" You know?
Yeah. If they got his.
Oh, if they got his bell. Oh, you could hear this. Ah! So it was quite an interesting place.
Well, I love to interject as well, because I want to capture some thoughts, because our backgrounds are even the more you say, the more I realise they're more similar than I even realised, I knew they were similar. But I used to say to my mum as a teenager, "Mum, one day I'm going to be a millionaire, I'm going to buy you a house," kind of thing. And even back then. But so let's just go back. You know, you're now, I don't get into money too much, but nine-figure wealth. But back then, you're living in a room with locked doors, so that in the house other people don't steal it. Ladies of the night above, proper
Absolutely.
Peaky Blinder country. Did you have any belief at that point that you would be successful and then progress to anything like what you've achieved?
No, in truth, I mean, I would love to be able to say I had a plan. I didn't. I just wanted to do the best I possibly could. And I certainly wanted to get away from Small Heath and make our lives better. Now, because we were running newsagents at the time, which are very long hours, you know, like 80 hours
every
a week.
day.
And I would do the 80 hours, you know, it wasn't a case of having time off, because you did. I wanted to do well. But you didn't get a chance to spend your money.
So you went into a property?
It used to go into a coffee pot,
Right.
because half my income was rent.
Yeah.
And I had money, you know, one of those meters to put
Electric.
2 bob bits in. And Rosie, bless her, she'd gone to work at Boots in Birmingham, so there was a second income coming in. And what happened was, which was really the first step change, was when Alex Stewart, the guy, you know, the ex-policeman, said to me, "We've got a shop in Kingsbury Road, Erdington, that keeps getting burgled. The manager's bought a house down the road from there. The flat's empty. Would you like it rent-free? You can be our alarm system," you see. And I said, "Rent-free, Mr. Stewart?" "Yes, please, I'll have it." You know. So that enabled me to sort of save £7 or £8 a week in rent. And so at the end of a year, probably maybe just above that, I'd got enough to put down on our first house. And meanwhile, I'd been given a shop to run permanently, which was the first convenience store. It was a sort of quasi-convenience store on Chelmsley Wood, which was a very large council estate. And I'd picked that shop because it was going to be a tough one. And I thought I could show what I could
increase
do. And I could show what I could do there. But it was grocery.
Right.
You know, which
So
wasn't
new
easy.
categories, new lessons, new learning.
But not longer hours, the same hours as a newsagent. No off-licence in it, no wines and spirits or anything like that, but grocery and a deli counter and all that. So I learned lots of new things. And that was where I really was able, because it was permanent, to build a team. And I had a lovely team of ladies there, really, really good, committed people. Salt of the earth. I mean, and they would tell, and you know, we had a great relationship, because they'd tell me what they thought I should do and how I should do it if I was doing it, incorrectly and so on and so forth. And I ran that, and we were so successful that I think we were the first shop to do double-digit net profit at branch level.
Right.
So the branch contribution was double-digit, first one.
Which the groceries helped with, I guess, as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was.
Because the tobacco always pulled it down.
Absolutely. But yes. I mean, full margin in those days was about 10%.
Yeah.
Super Cigs, which was a bit later, wasn't it? 3%.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine that. But the cash flow. Oh. Anyway, so did that for 7 or 8 months. Got 3 stock results, all surpluses, which were great. Shouldn't be able to do that, actually, but I managed to do that. And so I was then asked at 19 to be whether I would like to be an area manager.
Brilliant.
And I got an advance phone call from Mr. Stewart, which I probably shouldn't have, saying, look, if Mr. Magson, the deputy MD, rings you up, put your best suit on. And that's all he would tell me. So anyway, Mr. Magson did ring me up. I went to the office. It was for an area manager role, 26 shops in Birmingham.
Brilliant.
At 19 years old.
Which, again, it's fair to say, because a few weeks ago on my podcast, we did Dave Potts, who's CEO
the
of
Tesco
Morrison's.
man, of course, yeah.
And similarly, he
Former
left
Tesco.
school with 5 Fs at O level, and and is a great CEO today. But he would also talk about at 19, he was running one of Tesco's stores, a small store, but one of their stores, and he said the benefit. People often talk about university. But they're just starting university, and I'd already had 3 years experience kind of thing. So that work experience is the university of life. It doesn't all have to be about going to university, does it?
No. I mean...
Because I think a lot of kids today think they've got to go to university to be successful.
I think it's harder today. I do, because I think the playing... To have a level playing field, you're encouraged to stay on in education for all sorts of reasons, both practical and political, I think. But... in those days, the number of university applicants and there were grants and all sorts of stuff that you could latch onto. But if you were lucky, I mean, Mike, when you're doing a job, you need an element of hard work. You definitely need honesty. You definitely need a good boss.
Yeah.
At least for several parts of your career. And when I say a good boss, somebody that will help you, will train you.
Tough love, but also there to support you.
Oh, I mean, I've been called all sorts by bosses, but for the right reasons. But bosses that when you've done something really well, they don't take the glory.
Yeah.
They make sure that those above them know that one of their guys, Jim or Mike or whatever, or one of their girls, one of their team, has produced something that's worthy of note.
Which is a sign of true leadership, because, of course, they still get the recognition anyway.
Absolutely.
But they don't steal it from someone in the team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you need that.
Hope you're enjoying Success is a System. Every Tuesday, we launch it on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Drop us a note and tell us who you would like to see or hear on Success is a System, or what subjects you'd like us to cover to help you and your business. Success is a System. Like, subscribe, and make sure you get it every Tuesday for great lessons and systems that have made people wealthy, healthy, and successful.
You need a little bit of luck, I remember being burgled at one of the shops. It was Garrett's Green in Birmingham, and I'd got no transport. So when I was banking, I had to use the bus. Jeez. And every night I used to have to go up on the bus with a night safe wallet. Some of us can remember the night safe wallets nowadays.
In Birmingham?
Yeah. And I'd have to deposit it. Now, this particular day, I'd worked, 12, 14 hours or whatever it was. And I was tired, and I wanted to get home and have my dinner and stuff. So I wouldn't have got home till perhaps 7:30, 8 o'clock. And I thought, well, shall I put the night safe wallet in overnight? And it was the only time I didn't, Mike. And Rosie said to me, when I spoke to Rosie, I said, I'm going to leave the night safe tonight. She said, oh, really? And I said, yes. She said, you shouldn't do that. I said, well, I'm going to. I said, She said, well, hide it. I said, really? Where hide it? Where? She'll put it in the fridge, in the ice cream fridge. I said, well, I don't think I can do that. She said, well, put it under the fitting then, where the newspapers and the magazines are, the plinth lifted up. And you could put it on there and put the plinth back. So I did. And never thought any more of it until I got there at 6 o'clock the following morning. And I opened the front door and I pulled the newspaper bundles and things in, and I looked at the cigarette gantry. There wasn't anything on it. All the cigarettes had
It had
gone.
been robbed, yeah.
And then I looked at the side door, and that was open. And there were thousands of packets of crisps all over this passageway, and a massive hole in the tobacco storeroom. I thought, oh, God. Then I looked at the alarm box, and the alarm box it was only a cupboard door key, had been opened, and it had all been switched off. Oh, no. Because the next thing I'm thinking is...
Cash.
The cash. If the cash is gone, I'm gone. Because that's me finished.
Yeah.
Because I've broken the rules. This is the end of me. I'm 19, Well, just before I was promoted this. So, anyway, God, it's the longest 10 yards in my life. I got that, and I lifted this, and it was there. Oh, jeez. So anyway, I ran.
So that's the luck.
Oh, and I'm coming on to the good boss. So my sales assistant was an elderly lady called Mrs. Moody, and I rang her up because this is like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I said, we've been burgled, I've got this night safe wallet, and I've got to get up to the bank and put it in, And she said, well, Joe was her husband, Joe Moody, and he was probably, well, he seemed very old in those days. He was probably 60. Anyway, she sent him up, and he took it up to the night safe and put it in the night safe. I rang the area manager and the security department. The area manager, this is where you need a good boss. The area manager was a chap called Bill Little. And he was a fairly darkish complexion, I always remember, a very handsome man. And he came in and he said, well, what's happened? And I said, well, I've been burgled, I didn't put the night safe. He said, oh, yes, you did. He said, well, no, he said, where is it? I said, well, it's up in the night safe now. I said, but that was done this morning. He said, no, it wasn't. I said, it was, Mr. Little. He said,
no, it wasn't.
Jim, it wasn't. I said, Mr. Little, it was, honestly. I sent Joe Moody up with it. He said, Jim, I'm telling you, you did that last night. I said, right, okay, Mr. Little. So he said, let's have just check all the cash and everything.
Yeah.
He said, you didn't bank so-and-so? No. He said, well, where's that then? I said, well, that was in the tobacco store. That was the day before's takings. So it was the one before.
Yeah.
So he said, He said, but that was all locked up. Oh, yes. He said, and where were the floats for the tills? Because I had 2 tills. I said, well, they should have been in the tobacco storeroom. I said, but they were in the tills. He said, no, they weren't. I said, they were. I said, they were. He said, no, the company rules say they were in the tobacco storeroom.
Same
So
as
that's
Martin's
where.
when I
So
was
that's
there.
where they were. I said, oh. Do you get it, Jim? I said, yes. Now, he had the chance at that point to make a bit of a name for himself. I checked and Jim had got it wrong.
He's a bad one.
Yes, and I'd have gone. He chose not to. And because of that one thing, really, I was able then, subsequently, through lots of other interactions and stuff, but to end up as MD there. So you need a good boss.
But also on that is a really, it's a life-changing moment, but it also sets you up to allow people to fuck up in the future.
Yes.
And I think it's really important because I'm sure you then came across people throughout the time that had made a mistake, a genuine mistake, and they think this is the end.
Well, that's absolutely
But you can give them the help, the hand up that he gave you. So.
I think that's right, Mike. I think the other thing is you suddenly realise why the rules are in place. And you think, actually, never compromise those.
Yeah.
Just do it. If you have to get somewhere faster, then do it knowingly and know what the risks are. And I used to do a bit of that as well.
So in that one incident, there's 4 or 5 solid lifetime lessons.
Absolutely. So lucky Jim, which is a sort of phrase I've used throughout the life. But so anyway, I then went to do this 26 shops in Birmingham, and I took over from a guy who actually went into group training. And there's me, 19. I looked a bit older because I was married, and I was a bit. The marriage and whatnot had matured me a little bit faster than perhaps most. But I got managers in their 50s and their 60s, and we were pretty much the bottom area, in terms of sales performance and profitability and so on and so forth. And I had a really good look at it. And I've got a bit of an advantage because I knew how the offices worked, because I'd done some of my trainee work there at the centre.
Yeah.
And I realised that they were all counter service. Now this was, this sounds like ludicrous now, But they were all counter service, and everything was pretty much nailed down. So all the confectionery were behind glass returns. So you couldn't pinch it, but you couldn't really buy it either. So, we weren't exposing it to the risk of sale.
Yeah. So that still happens today in some areas.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I said to the guys, look, I said, we haven't got any capital. We can't refit the stores with nice new fittings and stuff. And they were self-employed managers. They got 7p in the pound commission. So they wanted to sell more, but we didn't really make it easy for them. But anyway, so I said, you know what? I said, in our team, 26 managers, I said, we've got carpenters, we've got electricians, we've got plumbers, we've got all sorts of people, builders, they've all got a bit of it. I said, how would it be if we use some of the petty cash, because I could get away with that because I've got a limit on that, to buy, some wood and some, screws and, returns and all sorts of stuff. I said, but if we do that, we do it on a Sunday afternoon when the shop's shut at 1. I said, we'll put a team in and we'll do it one by one. So if you come and help, we'll get to your shop eventually. And that will put money on you. Well,
so much going, in there in terms of systems for success. We got teamwork, we got paying it forward, we got, recognising you got to go above and beyond, doing it on a Sunday. And so much now that people say, I'm not doing that. My shift finishes it.
I've got managers, Mike, coming to me saying, when's my shop going to be done? When is my shop going to be done? I said, well, we will get to you, but you've got to come and help us. And of course, the sales went through the roof, and the profitability went through the roof. And managers are,
they're earning more money.
Managers are happy. The customer service is better. They're earning more money. The wives are happier. The kids are better. And suddenly, I'm a hero. And this is all being, well, we're all heroes, really, but I'm the figurehead. Because I've
You've enabled it. Yeah.
Exactly, I've enabled it. And so we go from bottom to top. And this is in 18 months. So I then get asked if I'd like to be a regional manager, one of two. So, yes, please, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yes, please, sir. And so I had 6 area managers and 120 stores. Now, that was a bit more challenging, a bit more difficult. But I could only be first or second.
Yeah.
And I was first. So that was great too. And I got some good lads. I mean, along this journey, I have had to make some changes to personnel. Because if they're not with you, they're against you, aren't they? And you need to get rid of some people. So I remember there was one. I can say this because it actually went to court. But there was one a chap called L.J. Bailey, Leslie James Bailey, and he'd a huge stock loss. And this is when I was an area manager. And I went to see him, and I said, it's 3,000 quid gone in 15 weeks. And this was
huge. A lot of money then.
Oh, huge money. House with that. Huge money. And he said, I said, let's do a cash check. So we did the cash check. So where's, I borrowed that. I'm going to put that back in. So I said, where's your wife? Oh, she's upstairs in accommodation. I said, I'm just going to go up and have a chat with her. So I go, I said, about the stock loss. And she said, and it was his second wife. And she said, oh, I know where that is, the money is. Do you? She said, yes. She said, he's been giving it to his family, his first family. I said, what makes you say that? So she told me. Well, you could knock me over because normally husband and wife are, they'll just support each other or they'll say nothing, But I went back downstairs and I said to her, Mrs. Bailey has explained to me what's been going on here. Do you want to tell me now? He said, oh, go on then. And this bloke was about 63, 64, something like that. Anyway,
doing the wrong thing, but for good reasons.
But I dismissed him, and I phoned the police. Got the relief manager across, changed the locks and stuff. He went upstairs, got the police, and I remember the police said they would, because we got all the evidence and everything, you see, and of the shortage and all that business, and he admitted to me, and she told me, so we got everything in place, and that was I think on a Monday or a Tuesday, and by the Friday the police hadn't called. I started getting a bit itchy about this, I thought, So anyway, I rang up the DS, and I said, he told me that you were going to go and pick him up and, interview him and subject to what you found, charge him. And he said, we're going to do that Sunday. And I said, well, why Sunday? And he said, you learn, don't you, in life? He said, well, because most solicitors will be on the golf course on their boats. So he said, oh, right. Now, this is backfiring off. It's not going to hurt anybody, but dear, oh, dear. So you learn again. Yeah. You learn again. So, regional manager, did that. And then the sales director of the company of Dillon's, Jack Hill, who was a lovely chap, was promoted to a subsidiary, which left a gap. And I thought, now top region, and still wet behind the ears, really, Mike, and learning all the time, within the confine of quite a narrow industry at that point, newsagents, And but I'm thinking, well, by this time I was about 24, 25, something like that. And I said to the chairman, Geoffrey Batman, Battman, Geoffrey Batman, I was going to apply for it. And he said, well, I wouldn't do that. I said, why is that, Mr. Batman? He said, well, you won't get it. He said, we want somebody from outside with different experience and different skills and so on and so forth. I said, oh. I said, well, is it going to be advertised? Oh, it's going to be in the Sunday Times this coming Sunday. I said, oh, right. I said, well, thank you very much. So anyway, I went and bought the Sunday Times, and I think it was PA Associates was the search company. Yeah. And I thought, I'm going to apply for this. So, I probably shouldn't have, but I did. And they were very good because they interviewed me, PA did. And I went down to London for the interview, and I'd never really had a proper interview. But best whistle and flute, and I remember what my dad said, shiny shoes, make sure your hair's right, and all the rest of it. Good knot, your tie. And I went through the process. And I didn't hear anything for 8 weeks. And I realised that I wasn't going to get it, because I hadn't heard anything for 8 weeks. And I thought, I know what's happening here. I don't feature. They're not going to tell me until they've appointed. Yeah. And that's what happened. So the chairman called me in, and he said, you haven't got it. I said, well, I realise that, Mr. Batman. I'm very disappointed. I said, but, I would have done you a good job as sales director. And he said, well, we've got a chap that was head of Benelux for Dixon's, and he had introduced audio into Dixon's and had made a big success of it. And he was joining us as sales director, and it was intended that when the MD retired, he would have, if he'd done a good job, he would be the natural successor. So I think, in a way, they were saying to me, hold on a bit. There may be something for you going on. They never said that, but that's what I think may have been. Yeah. Anyway, he cobbled it. He didn't do a particularly good job at all. But meanwhile, and you'll remember this, Mike, they bought a group of shops on the south coast called Argus, Argus, as in the peacock, from Westminster Press. 47 shops, I think there were. Much smaller than I was used to, but this was going to be the assistant general manager role. So much broader, including buying and all sorts, HR, the lot, everything. So he said, do you fancy that? And I didn't get on with this new sales director. It wasn't my cup of tea, let's say that. Probably enough to say. I said, oh, yes, I'd love to go. I said, well, you haven't seen, No. I said, am I reporting?
So you wanted a new challenge, change of geography, get away from that guy.
Yeah, and I would be reporting into the MD of the group.
Yeah.
John Hayward, who was a marvellous man. So Rosie, bless her, no question. Yeah, of course, we'll go. So we lived above a shop in Ham Road, Worthing, on a temporary basis until...
The home of convenience, really.
Yeah.
Bob's Bearing and
Well, I'm going to talk about that. So we got down there, we lived there, rent-free, which was great. Sold the house up in... By then I'd moved to this one in Erdington. And sold that. But, of course, the houses in the south were 3 times the price of the ones in there. So I had to borrow a lot of money off the company on very low interest, on the basis if I left the business, I had to repay it in full. But they were very kind to me, very low interest. So I was able to buy what I would call a wigwam. It was a very tall roof like that, 2 bedrooms upstairs, nothing grand. It was, actually not very grand at all, but we loved it. Yeah. And we did the same thing there. We basically went to town on the security, on the sales, on everything. And we refurbed the shops and stuff. And we tripled the profit in 2 years.
Wow.
And the general manager, a chap called Bevan, who was approaching retirement, we asked him to retire early because he was a bit of a stopper. You know, he as soon as he went, everything accelerated. So it was brilliant. And I think he was probably happier as well, you know, as a result. But it gave me and my team, and I didn't have to make many changes there. I mean, there were some great people there. One I remember in particular, David Mackenzie, who had been the chief cashier of Beaverbrook newspapers, and he'd ended up as an area manager there as a result of a robbery at Express, where he got a sawn-off shotgun put into his mouth. Wow. And he went and ran a news agent then, and eventually that joined Argus, and thank God, because he was brilliant. Wonderful man. Wonderful man. So we had a great team, did really well, and as a result of doing well there, I was invited back to be Group MD.
Okay, good.
But whilst I was there, and this is the convenience bit, a chap called Ralph Cousins, who was a Sunday news wholesaler, said to me, "You know what, Jim? You've got to start doing convenience." And I said, in my naivety, "Oh no, far too hard. All that extra hours. Oh no, we're making loads of money." And you know, he said, "Well, the future's convenient." And he kept, every time I saw him,
He'd tell you that.
he'd tell me that. And eventually I said to him, "Ralph," I said, "look, why don't we have a couple of days out, you and I? Would you show me some of these things that you're telling me about?" And there was one.
Because convenience store was not even a term back then, was it? It was sort of born out of a combination, I always think, of Bob Sperring and John Irish, who had been to the States and had bought this kind of theme
Absolutely.
back.
And One Stop, which was part of Portsmouth and Sunderland. But Bob Sperring was really the man, wasn't he? Well, the two brothers.
He immediately opened long hours.
Wow. Didn't make much money trading. Did when he sold the business. But didn't make much money. But they were fabulous shops.
Yeah.
They looked
opened 180 when Circle K bought it.
Circle K, yeah, my goodness. Anyway, so I went out and had a couple of days with Ralph going around these convenience stores. And I was amazed. Because at 6 o'clock in the morning, when the news wholesaler delivered, there was piles of newspapers. So you knew
it was doing well.
You could just look at a store with piles of newspapers outside.
Because that's traffic.
Yes.
You can read the traffic.
Absolutely. So the first one that became available was one in St James's Road, Chichester. And it was about 2,000 square feet, might have been 1,800, a very old-fashioned grocery shop with newspapers. But it had a licence, and it did, I remember, did 20 dozen filled baps every morning for the industrial estate. And the man that owned it was a chap called Aylward, Mr. Aylward, who was a philatelist, stamp collector. And he used to get around the currency restrictions. Oh, he'd be long. By putting like a stamp, pinning a stamp out. Do you remember when you were only allowed to take 50 quid out of the country on foreign currency? And this is like global trading, fantastic. Anyway, Mr. Aylward, bless him, sold us this business. And I got hold of Booker to do all of the planograms and everything. I got hold of a chap called Richard Westwood, I think his name was, who was the shop fitter, Wedderburn shop fitters, who used to do One Stop and all that. Yeah. And we refitted it out. And it went from 5,000 a week, which was a really good take per week, to 20 the week after we'd finished.
Amazing.
So it was doing $1 million a year.
Which at that time was unheard of.
It made over £200,000 on its own net.
Brilliant.
Net. And I thought, whoa.
And this is 30 years ago? No, more. 40 years ago.
Yeah, this would have been 80, it was around about the Falklands time. So 82 was Falklands. About 83, 84. Yeah. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. Fantastic. And yes, it's longer hours. And yes, they're a bit more difficult. But
one of the things when I was selling Spa 8 till late, to a lot of independent grocers would be saying, yeah, but the costs don't go up proportionally because you've got your rent already, whether you open 2 hours or 20 hours. You've got your electric running the fridges, whether you open 2 hours or 20 hours.
Yes.
Kind of thing. And so suddenly when you open longer hours, your proportional margin per hour was much higher.
Absolutely. And people would pay for convenience.
Yeah.
And really, what we were doing was professionalising the corner shop.
Yeah.
That's what we were doing.
Evolving it.
Yes. Yeah. So bigger premises than the corner shop, wider assortment, better standards, better hygiene, all those sort of things.
Consistent disciplines.
Absolutely. And you would be in stock and you got news and stuff and things. So, and this is before the loss of the Sunday newspapers and, the monopoly and lottery and all this sort of stuff was, all really important stuff. So, we went from 0 to 7, a bit like 0 to 62 in a race sports car, like that. And the 7 made more than the 45 or 47 stores in total. Right. So that was the start of convenience.
And that's hard to ignore. You've got to then think,
absolutely,
we need to bring that across the network.
So God bless Ralph Cousins and his perseverance in telling me, despite me saying, no, and kept on at me about convenience. And when I realised, when we did that first one, then we bang, go fast. So they always say, don't they, if you're going to fail fast, it's cheaper. But if it's a winner, get going and get doing it, and dominate before anybody else can.
And that still amazes me today that there are so many businesses around the UK that have, so let's call that your model, that have a model that works. They might be a butcher's, they might be a restaurant, but if you had a model that you knew worked, you'd replicate it, wouldn't you? Absolutely. Or you should, because then it works here and here and here. It doesn't work everywhere, but most places. And yet so many businesses are living lives of quiet desperation without realising they could multiply that model with good people, good infrastructure, good systems.
Yes.
But they could then become business scale, because everyone forgets Tesco's was a delicatessen. Sainsbury's was a delicatessen. Absolutely. Operating out of a tiny store. Absolutely. They're on a journey that's different today, but it was the scaling and the multiplying and the disciplines that took them to where they exist today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to Success as a System. Watch out for the second part with Jim McCarthy next week. Here's a sneak preview of what's to come in next week's episode. Well, one of the sayings I use a lot now is everyone in your business is either an anchor or a propeller.
Yes.
And sometimes you can be an anchor one day and a propeller the next, but if you're an anchor too often, you'd hold the business back.
And I'd been working really hard, and rather selfishly, I suppose, in lots of ways, and not putting as much into the family as you would. She said, I think you've got to know, I think they're thieving from you. I said, who's thieving from you? Some of the people, some of the operatives in the warehouse. Really? Yes, and it's aisles so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so, and so-and-so. And if you check the cameras, you'll see it. How long's that been going on? Well, it's been going on for a few months, and I don't like it.